We have another bunch of scriptures today. I always like that. From Proverbs, chapter 21. The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. All deeds are right in the sight of the doer, but the Lord weighs the heart. From 1 Samuel, chapter 3. Then the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make both ears of anyone who hears it tingle." And as I understand it, that's a fairly dramatic use of the word tingle. It's like heavy. Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God and who are called according to God's purpose. And from the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 5. One day while Jesus was teaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law who had come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem were sitting nearby, and the power of the Lord was with him to heal. Just then some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a stretcher. They were trying to bring him in and lay him before Jesus, but finding no way to bring him in because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and let him down on the stretcher through the tiles in the middle of the crowd in front of Jesus. When he saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven you." Then the scribes and the Pharisees began to question, "Who is this who is speaking blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" When Jesus perceived their questionings, he answered them, "Why do you raise such questions in your hearts? Which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven you, or to say, stand up and walk? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins," he said to the one who was paralyzed, "I say to you, stand up and take your stretcher and go to your home." Immediately he stood up before them, took what he had been lying on, and went to his home glorifying God. Amazement seized all of them, and they glorified God and were filled with fear, saying, "We have seen incredible things today." Here ends the reading.
Have you seen incredible things today? Yet? Good. The way I see it, we each live 365 days a year, and within each of those are 24 hours or 1,440 moments. That comes to somewhere around 525,000 moments a year that we get to be here in this wonderful world. We're all given a different number of years, but even in a very short life, when you consider it, each of us is given millions and millions of moments. The familiar story of the healing of the paralytic man from Luke's gospel reminds us that we are given the opportunity to see many strange things in this life. And I think it's important not to think, why is everything we remember when Jesus was walking around on earth? Why is that the only time strange things happened that were beautiful and healing and wonderful? Because where am I? Yeah, I think I'm there. Because they are unable to push through the crowd, a paralyzed man's friends and family lower him on the bed from the roof above. It's funny, the kids were playing magnet tiles. Do you guys have those, any of you? And there was a hole in the roof, and I was writing this sermon, and I just said, and I used that as an opportunity to tell the Bible story of how that's where you could go down. It's a dramatic and memorable image of arrival into the presence of power and spirit. It's a seizing of the moment. Well, better said, a powerful recognition of the spiritual moment and a letting down into it. Carl Jung, the early 20th century Swiss psychotherapist. Has anybody done any reading on this fellow? When Steve showed interest in it as a young man in grad school, his mother gave him the whole collection. That man was prolific, not Steve. Jung defined he spoke a great deal about something called synchronicity, or meaningful coincidence. Jung defined synchronicity as a meaningful coincidences that cannot be explained by cause and effect. These are not just random, but reflect a deeper order of the universe. The lovely mandala he painted in 1916 and published in 1955 appears on the front of the bulletin today. When Kathy told me she had chosen that, I said, well, I better talk about that a little bit. You know, it might scare some of you. You may not see that real Christian right away, but there's Christianity in it. The lovely mandala he painted appears on the front of the bulletin. It has been described as a cosmological map, which shows the place of the human microcosm within the greater macrocosm. In my reading about this, I came to understand that Jung, like many other artists and great minds, deliberately left it unfinished. Liz Green, a writer and Jungian analyst, had an interesting take on this. She wrote, "It seems that great creative endeavors can have an existence independent of their authors. These endeavors will simply push up through the soil toward the light, no matter the resistance." What do you hear in that sentence? I hear, Jung may not have entirely known where he was going, or where it would lead, or where it would lead to the next person that looked at it. In addition to being a prolific writer, Jung had a thriving psychotherapy practice as well. This is his description of a moment of synchronicity which he experienced in a therapy session. Now remember, Jung works with dreams. That's what he's working, that's what the material is. As a young woman, a young woman I was treating had a critical moment, a dream in which she was given a golden scarab. While she was telling me this dream, I sat with my back to the closed window. Suddenly I heard a noise behind me, like a gentle tapping, and I turned around and saw a flying insect knocking against the window pane from the outside. I opened the window and caught the creature in the air as it flew in. It was the nearest analogy to a golden scarab one finds in our latitudes. A scarabide, I don't know if I pronounced that right, beetle, the common rose chaffer, which, contrary to its usual habits, had evidently felt the urge to get into a dark room at this particular moment. Okay, here we go. Others throughout history have called these strange happenings, or parallel stories, or tales of remarkable love, or healing, or dreams, or peeks into destiny, God moments. They come at us unawares. We're all too often unprepared to receive them. So we don't, and they escape our consciousness and fade away. Their power to orient and give meaning to life is lost. Their gift to us is refused, sometimes through our own innocent blindness, but other times through our stubbornness to refuse to acknowledge what does not fit into our rational mental framework. We may notice an odd coincidence, a graceful and powerful feeling such as a visitation by a wild animal that looks us into the eye, a bird, a rabbit, a fox, an intense feeling of deja vu on visiting a place you'd never been before, an immediate and unexplained connection to another soul, the whole anam cara, or the presence of a departed soul. But we seldom recognize these as synchronicities. We attribute them to chance for the most part, if we notice them at all. And even if the nature of the experience insists that we pay attention and take it seriously, well, we seldom speak of it to another. in fear of looking the fool, or to avoid any attempt for another to explain it all away. But here's a thought. If these synchronicities, these God moments, exist at all, then why only sometimes, and to some people, and not to others? And that trips us up. There comes a very natural and welcoming humility. Well, if this is happening all the time, why is it just me that's hearing this? We may ask ourselves, oh, come on, who do you think you are receiving spiritual messages? Perhaps these meaningful coincidences, these moments pregnant with spirit and truth surround us all of the time. And we move too fast to feel them. Well, what about this? We have to limit our perceptions of the Spirit, or we would find life and its holiness just too intense for daily living. Remember the passage in Exodus where Moses receives the tablets of the covenant from God on Mount Sinai? When he comes down the mountain to share that with the crowd, the skin on his face shines brightly, and the Israelites are afraid. After this, he puts on a veil and takes it off only in the presence of God when he goes up the mountain. The presence of the Spirit can be just too powerful. In every moment of each day, all 1,440, if we had spiritual significance, if each one had spiritual significance, we'd be overexposed and exhausted, feeling a little bit crazy. I recently learned that the traditional Jewish skull cap was worn symbolically to protect the faithful from too weighty a message from God. We have to filter many of these moments out so that we are not overwhelmed. The trouble is most of us get too good at this filtering. Our whole material, rational, technological society at this time in the world has gotten too good at this. We stand smugly against the experience of the numinous, the spiritually potent, because we know too much and we are beyond this magical thinking. And besides, we've seen too much of its abuses. The charlatans who have exploited others with it, the victimized naive who have succumbed to it. It's true. But there's a price for our sophistication, great education. And it's a deadening of the spirit, a radical loneliness, sometimes an almost belligerent irritability that comes from feeling the need to reduce all mystery and to bring it under our mental control. What if we paid attention to the God moments piercing through the ordinariness of our living? What if our intellect and the numinous phenomena of the world surrounding us are not at war with each other? What might happen if we humbly stood before segments of this miracle, which for some divine reason we have been privileged to receive? A few days ago, I found a book on the shelf I read 2 decades ago. It was titled Soul Moments, Marvelous Stories of Synchronicity, Meaningful Coincidences from a Seemingly Random World, by a fellow named Phil Cosino. By the way, I went all over looking for it before I found it on my shelf, and nobody had it because it's old. 90-something, the 90 was published. I read many of these stories, and I was aware of an inner skeptic in myself that asked, would others today see these stories as descriptions of God moments? Especially because they were a lot of California hippies too, you know? And I said, I don't think this plays well in the Midwest. Would they wonder if they were just wishful thinking and that someone was trying too hard because they so badly wanted or needed a God moment? This disturbed me, but it also began to awaken something in me. Though we struggle with believing stories others tell of meaningful coincidences in their lives, wondering what is so amazing or spiritual about these coincidences. When a God moment happens to us, when we experience a momentary awareness of the way the outer world has paralleled our own inner world. We just deeply know. We just deeply know. Next week I'm going to talk about knowing. There's Greek words different Greek words for to know. We just deeply know, and we don't need to prove or convince anyone else. Remember that curious statement in the book of Samuel where Samuel hears God say, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make both ears of anyone who hears of it tingle." And so I went to the place to find out what other translations, how they had put it. They said tingle. Why not stop and listen and trust ourselves to feel just what we feel? Why not practice asking that simple but potent question, what might the meaning be here? As we move through the ordinary moments of our lives. Why not stand in awe before the fragments of the miracle of life that has come our way? What kind of grace might we receive? What kind of peeks into our own destiny? What magnitude of inspired energy might we release into this world and into our own hearts and minds if we did pay attention? Well, a few of you, here it is, gang. I'm going to open this up. And, well, let me just say, I'm going to open it up. A few of you have shared with me meaningful coincidences that you have experienced in your life. And I've shared some of mine with you. Some are rather dramatic and some quite subtle. So would anyone here like to share one? If not, I will. Anybody want to? Good. He'll.
I don't know that this has any meaning to it. I haven't found it yet. But in the last 3 days, our book group read Overstory. And when we met for discussion, instead of talking about the book, we shared with each other our experiences with trees. So it started there. So I went to my poetry group yesterday morning, and the person presenting had poems about birds, which I will share with you someday. And then here I am this morning. So what it means, I have no clue, but I just wanted to share that synchronicity.
Cool, and by the way, that book, which I didn't get to book study, and I have only read 1 or 2 chapters, is powerful reading. I mean, that is beautifully written. So if you get a chance, I did bring my book back today. I'll have to just buy one. Who else? Yeah.
I have many of them, and I can't bring any of them to mind. Except there's one, a couple of months ago. I have a book sitting on my bedroom bookshelf, called Beauty by John O'Donohue. And it's been sitting there for a long time, and I've not even noticed it. And one day, my eye fell on that book. One Sunday morning, my eye fell on that book, and I said, I really got to pick that up and start reading it again. The sermon that morning Karin preached was on beauty. Small thing. But that one sticks in my head because it reminded me, I made the comment in church lately, the last week or two, it's like there have been a lot of these moments happening, little ones, big ones, and why are there so many just right now? And it didn't take a whole long time to figure out the foolishness of that statement. They happen all the time. We're just not noticing them. You referred to that in your sermon already. They don't have to be big deals. They can be little things like that. But they're all the time.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, I don't know whether you want something this big or not, but
I don't want, it's not me, it's you.
my family was not a church-going family, and so I began going to church eventually with Barbara Wilpensky, the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. I found out many years later, almost accidentally, that my grandfather had been a minister of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. And not only that, the first church I served, was in a little town in Iowa, which was just 29 miles from where my father was born and from where his father was campus minister. I think that's a coincidence. The other part of that is that when I left the disciple church and came here, this was a part of a congregational church. I mean, a congregational church joined with a couple of others to become UCC. My maternal grandmother was a member of the congregational church. I think those are coincidences.
Oh, we're not gracious Godding yet, but let's just say one big gracious God over the top.
Trees, birds, air. I moved my hummingbird feeder from the front porch to the back porch a week ago because the hummers hadn't been coming at the front porch. And I have just so enjoyed seeing them when I've been able to eat outside on the back deck and see the birds come to that feeder.
Yeah. Great. Back there, she's had her hand up.
I'm kind of like Mark. Like for a very, very long time in my life, I have noticed synchronicities in my life. And a lot of it is when I come to church and I've been having a hard time about something, and the preacher will preach on it. And it happens to me, and I recognize that every time. And it can be here in my regular church. It can be in Alabama when I go home and go to church. It just happens. It happens to me, and I recognize that. And I feel blessed every time it does because it eases my mind from whatever issue has been bothering me. And then the other thing that I notice in my life that I call synchronicities are numbers. And I'll get my mind on something and then numbers will start showing up in something I'm reading, driving down the road. I mean, they just pop up and I'm like, I get it, okay.
Thank you. That's interesting. I've heard that from several people.
Can I comment on something Tony said?
But yeah,
How many people in this room have said, that sermon was aimed at me today? I've heard it from several of you.
that's because I'm every man.
So I have a story from when I was still in college. I was in organic chemistry 2, and that's a beast of a class to take. I had just gotten back from taking a semester off to take care of Levi. So I'm back to school, and I remember I was terrified for this exam. I don't remember what it was, but I felt like I hadn't studied enough, and I prayed and I asked God, I said, you gotta really pull me through this one. Like, I really need your help here. And I was studying the practice exams that the professor gives us, and it was the exact same as the exam I actually took. That didn't happen very often. Actually, I think that only happened once. So that was weird.
Wow. We're proud of you, too, for all that you've done. That's amazing. We're putting you to work, Jason.
Well, I don't know whether this is synchronicity or if it's just mental telepathy. But
What's the other choice?
mental telepathy.
Oh, God.
Oh, as you all know, I have a twin sister, and we have so many very common, detailed thoughts and she calls me sometimes and she says, I was just thinking of this, Gloria, and I just wanted to know what you think. And I said, so was I. And it's just, sometimes it's spooky. But I know it happens. You don't have to have a twin. If you just are close to somebody, a friend or even a sibling, it's just spooky to me.
Spooky but wonderful, huh? Anybody else?
I don't know about spooky, but definitely something more going on than what we
There you
typically
go.
know,
That's enough.
right?
That's enough said. Yeah.
Okay, I shared this with Karin and one other person, I think, but earlier this summer, Lisa and I took an anniversary cruise to Alaska with my sisters and one other brother-in-law. And we got on the ship in Seattle, but before that, we were in line at the ports of entry and long lines, like a TSA airport type of thing. And I got separated from my sisters temporarily. And Lisa comes up to me and she says, "You have to come hear this." And there was a woman, a sweet young woman with a beautiful foreign accent. And I walk up and she's like, "Oh, you're the brother." So the backstory to this is she was standing there and she pulled my sisters aside and said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to deliver a message. And you fit the description, but your mother wants you to know that she's here with you and she's very proud of you. And one daughter in particular is the organizer of this entire cruise. And she just wants you to know that she's extremely proud." Well, my sister Tamara was the organizer of the cruise. And as it turns out, 47 years ago, when my mother passed away, the last conversation she had was an argument. And she struggled with that ever since. And a little skeptic, she started crying after she heard that. And all of these questions and details about my mother that this strange foreigner would have no way of knowing came forth. And it was just a beautiful exchange. And yeah, I believe in that. And I've had several instances of these types of things throughout my life that you're speaking of. And that was just very special. And I've been wanting something like that to happen, and I finally got to experience it. So
Thank you, Ted.
that's it. Sorry for long-windedness.
No, it was a great story. Anybody else? I'll just close with the yesterday. Oh, go ahead.
I can't top Ted's story, but
Okay. It's not a competition.
no. My dad owned a little small Ford dealership in Eaton, Colorado. You know, nothing like Denver dealerships, but they put their name, he and his partner's name, in a little plaque on every vehicle. Well, when Dad died in '99, suddenly, I was in Greeley taking care of details and feeling I was starting to really grieve, you know, and I stopped in a gas station to fill up my car, and in chugs this old pickup truck and pulled up right in front of me with his name right there. It kind of got me.
Yeah, I'll bet. Anybody else? Thanks for sharing. And I was going to say, if nobody shared today, I was fine with that, because these are private things too. And you might think, oh gosh, somebody is just going to say, well, what's so great about that?
I think you found something people are willing to share about.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh. Are you saying you want to?
I'll keep my stories for La Forêt, if that's all right.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Over the fire, playing a little guitar. Yeah, I like it. Well, yesterday my niece sent me a video online, 6 years after my mother's death. Mom was in the hospital, rather incoherent at the end of her life. My sister told her, or asked her, if she would talk into the phone and tell her grandchildren that she loved them and her great-grandchildren. And Mom started singing a song that came to her out of her love. And I didn't like watching the video. I mean, you know, Mama wasn't looking good, and you know, it was painful, and I was thinking, I don't know if I like this. But anyway, she was singing, and she sounded just like her old self when she did that. But then she would fall into, you know, but then she would come out and sing these songs. And while she was singing this song about love, she paused and got a little confused, and she said to my sister, "What is that box covered with a black cloth?" And then she went on with her singing. And to me, it felt weird, and my sister checked with me too. There was some mystery that she knew was at hand, but was hidden to her behind a dark cloth. And I say, the transition into the next world, perhaps. You know? But it was just such a break from, I love my children, to, what is that black box? Anybody else? Because that's not a very happy one. Stephen?
Okay. Actually, the Tom Moore quote about the kingdom of heaven being something through a window reminded me of this as I heard that. So when I was about 12 years old, maybe 11 or 12, I was into baseball. My grandfather actually was a professional baseball player, so as a 12-year-old, I thought that's probably the only adult activity I would want to evolve toward anyway. So I loved baseball so much I would actually sleep pretty regularly every night with my baseball glove and a ball, and kind of, caress it until I fell asleep. Anyway, I really had a strong warmth and connection to that activity. And one night, I was having a little trouble going to sleep, and my bed was right next to the window, and I looked out the window, and I was just sort of shocked to see a full moon that was so intense and so bright, and almost like it was glowing. And I just looked at it, and at 12, I think it was my first moment of realizing, like, wow, there's something else I don't know that much about that's really powerful. And I just looked at the moon, and it was as if it was my moon or something, and it was just shining back at me. And for whatever reason, maybe I also and I looked at it and I realized, my God, it's the same shape as the ball I have in my hand. And that was pretty much of a miracle for me at that moment. And then, for whatever reason, I also realized, and I'm looking at this ball and the moon with an eye that's the same shape as the ball. And whatever was going through my mind, it was so actually there is a God, and it's all going to be okay. That was my 12-year-old realization at that moment. But it was a feeling of like the future coming toward me, which I think is something synchronicity actually offers. There's a little sense of like the future isn't off. It's actually already here, speaking to you regularly. Because at that moment, even though I thought I was going to become a baseball player, I actually turned out I was going to become a lunatic.
Luna, yes.